or using, we hear of some cases in some states where one individual may have, or a household, may have more than 100 names on the wage bill, and those people have are not present to work. Those cannot be regarded as workers. So a transparent way needs to be brought on board to clean the system so that the workers, genuine workers, will be the ones, and we can determine what is genuinely the wage bill. Having said that, I think that in the medium term and into the long term, I think that what states must do is to wean themselves away from this feeding bottle syndrome, in which they make no effort themselves. Any state that is not able to initiate fiscal revenue drives internally to sustain development in the state should not really be regarded as viable. To continue to just wait for bailout or for federation account allocations and all that, and that is the only basis of state financial management, that is not sustainable.
So as Labour, permit me to just butt in here. As Labour, since you've said that such states should not be given that kind of leverage or that extension to help them out, what becomes of those states if they're unable to, as you said, be able to be sustainable themselves? What happens to such kinds of states?
Well, let me say, let's put this correctly. You know, the very first bailout was at our own instance. We appealed to Mr. President, and we wrote asking that the federal government should come to the aid of the states. That was the first bailout that was made. When we now find the way some of those were mismanaged is where we become weary. And we think that a proper, in short-term bailout given to states, but which must be strictly monitored, could be a solution in the short term. But the point we are making is that there is no state, if they manage their affairs properly, that are not capable of generating and sustaining themselves. If they do that, the economy itself will be the better for it. Because the process of seeking to create internal capacity will lead to economic development in individual states. But, you know, every state has one area that it has advantage in or the other. And the state governments must start to go into these areas as a way of wanting to develop their states and also increase their own capacity for internally generated revenues. And we think that this is the way that there will be sustainability going into the future.
All right, so the other question I'd like to ask is Labour not asking or taking on too much? I mean, you said something about monitoring this bailout. Yes, you wrote to the federal government, to the president, asking that he bails out some of the states, and that was done eventually with the first tranche and then the second tranche. But when you say monitoring, was that part of what the responsibility you decided to take on yourself?
No. When I say monitoring, I'm not saying that we as Labour will go monitoring. We're saying that if the federal government gives out bailout to states, the federal government needs to put in place mechanisms to monitor that the funds so released are used for what they were meant for. That's the monitoring. When the first bailout was done, we knew that we on our own would not be able to do the monitoring. What did we do? We wrote to the ICPC, and we reached an agreement with ICPC that they would, in cooperation with our various state councils, then do a monitoring of the disbursement of those funds. They came out with some reports later. They indicted some states that they said diverted some of those funds, but nothing ever came of them. So the monitoring is not for us. It is for the government using its own agencies to be able to identify states that may not have properly utilized such funds. Okay,
so you initially wrote that memo to the president to bail out the states. Now you've come out to say no more bailouts. How do you expect the state and indeed the salaries of their workers to be paid?
Well, if states have budgets, you know, the states themselves, they have budgets. States are fiscal entities. States are supposed to be able to collect revenues on their own. There are internally generated revenues. All these need to be prudently managed, transparently managed, and only when such have been done. When we are saying that, no bailout, what we are saying is no, those states that have not been able to account for bailouts in the past should not be given new bailouts. Those states that have demonstrated capacity and transparency, of course, may then have be open to such bailouts, given and that is part of actually the spirit of the Fiscal Responsibility Act, that you have to demonstrate transparency in order, for you to do certain things. And it is basically the same logic that we are putting forward.
When you used a word, supposed to be able to generate. They're also supposed to be able to manage. They're also supposed to be able to handle the payment of salaries of their workers in their state. But labor is also supposed to be able to stand firm and hold government accountable or be accountable to its members. How effective has labor been in the welfare, in accounting for the welfare of its members?
Well, in the context of what we're discussing, we have been virtually around this whole country, engaging with state governments, supporting workers at the state level that have their salaries have not been paid. We have had the national has had to mobilize to a number of states. We were in Imo State, you remember? We were in Oyo State. We were in Osun. Most recently, we were in Benue, and the impasse that lingers, for instance, in Kogi. We do hope we are going to be in Kogi, and these are the support that we have to give to our workers and protect their interests. The level to which we succeed is not completely within our own control, because, like you said, do we have the capacity to take on the whole country? But we will continue to do the struggles that we need to do and contestations that we need to do on behalf of our members, because that is our own duty.